Welcome to Leadership Unlearned and Reframed. When I speak about leadership, I am not only speaking about a role in an organization. We are all leaders in our own rights. Just imagine taking leadership of your family. What would that look like? Imagine in your place of worship being a leader, in your community, or even on your local football team. In this program, we want to debunk leadership. And since we are taking away, we want to give you something different. So we are offering new perspectives, different thoughts, and we are inviting you, our audience, to do the same. So every month we have one guest with us, a guest who is maybe an OD practitioner, a facilitator, but all our guests tend to have big hearts, and all our guests tend to be experts in their field. And so I met this guest just about late last year, and he has a big heart. He's extremely generous. He's extremely knowledgeable. And I love his analogies. So here with me today is Jerry Talley, and he is an expert at making the complex simple. So, Jerry, welcome to our podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Jerry, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Okay. I'm, I guess, a pretty classical OD consultant. I've worked with organizations. I think my first client was in the late 1970s. I actually started out as a professor at Stanford. I taught courses on work and love and sex. I figured that was pretty much comprehensive curriculum. Um, After about 15 years of teaching at Stanford, I discovered that teaching is a pretty expensive hobby, and I decided I had to get a real job. I had enough skills to go out into the consulting world, and so I spent the next 45 years working with several hundred companies. I've worked in pretty much every sector of the economy except for retail. Walmart thinks they can get along without me, and jury's still out. Um, in addition to being an OD consultant, I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I also consulted to a psychiatric ward for a few years and taught family therapy. So, between working with people who were semi-psychotic and dysfunctional families, I thought I was well prepared to work with executives. Um, and I've been pretty much up and down organizations from the C-suite to the manufacturing floor for the last few decades. Um, so that's my practice now. I have sort of stepped back from client servicing. I'm spending my time now teaching and mentoring for the next generation. I figure I'm getting to the age where it's time for me to step aside and make room for some new thoughts and new blood. So I'll hand off what I got and then see what develops.
Yeah. Jerry, as you were talking, I felt so much space. Like I felt like if I was in a big ocean swimming, and the words that actually popped out to me, a lot of words did. But was it work, love, and sex?
Work, love, and sex. Yes, unfortunately, I don't have the slides on sex for today. But yeah, work, love, and sex was my Stanford offering. I tended to have fairly large classes.
Yeah. And this whole notion of so I noticed the sort of pillars that you stood on, right? So you talked about your work in therapy. You spoke about, the psychiatric work that you did because you spoke about, the psychosis that possibly are in that the psychotic behavior may be present in the CEOs. That's the impression I got.
Yeah.
You spoke about the core OD, you spoke about the teaching. So how do you bring all of these elements together in the work that you've been doing in terms of working with organizations? How does it all come together?
Well, I think from my sociology background, I had an appreciation for structure and for systems, for engineered uh, architectures like we have in an organization in terms of org structure, for example, and policies, but also the organic systems, the unintended emergent aspects of an organization. From my background in therapy, I learned to ask questions to reveal information that the client doesn't want to acknowledge. So I got good at asking questions about very difficult topics. working on a psychiatric ward. I'm not bothered by somebody getting angry or violent or running out of the room or crying or tears or whatever. And that helps in organizations when everybody else is scared to talk about something because it's so volatile. I'm not, so I'm perfectly willing to wade into really messy topics. So all that came together in helping organizations discover the consequences of their internal structuring and the unintended consequences of the culture that emerged, and the need to deal with people as people. They're not just interchangeable cogs in a machine. They bring with them all the needs and foibles of humans. So occasionally we have to make room for people to grieve, to be angry, to be scared, to be apathetic, whatever.
Yeah.
That sort of made me a good OD consultant.
Yeah. It's, very often we speak about, the heart and soul and the connection between the intelligence and bringing our whole selves to the organization. But I've never really heard it so expressed in terms of pitting it to different humanistic theories or schools
No,
of thought. So
no.
I really appreciate that description of it. And I'm also thinking that it probably was one of your probably push points or centers of excellence that would put you in a good place to really have those sticky conversations or to deal with those volatile moments. So,
Yeah.
in terms of like conflict resolution and stuff, what are some of the things that you could really bring to an organization that you have been able to bring to an organization that maybe other consultants don't do as well?
I think too often as consultants, we imagine that we're experts. That is, we think that we are bringing some knowledge to the organization which they don't have. And if they'll just shut up and take notes, I can tell them the path out of their distress. And my approach has always been that the organization already has on site all the intelligence and information it needs to be an exceptional organization. It's all there. But it's suppressed, or it's broken into such small pieces that it feels like noise rather than signal. And my role is not to reveal the solution that they need. My role is to facilitate the conversation they haven't been able to do. So it's bringing the relevant parties together, whether it's in a focus group or a World Cafe or an employee survey or a series of interviews, somehow bring all the stakeholders to the table, even if the table is mediated by SurveyMonkey. Create an environment, a set of rules and a personal style that make it clear that it's safe to talk. It's okay to say that something is stupid or painful. I remember once I helped a client roll out a new strategic plan, and the first thing I asked was, at your tables, think of all the ways this strategic plan could stumble and fail. And people worked for 20 or 30 minutes, and we covered the wall with, I don't know, a couple of thousand flaws in the strategic plan. Of course, my client was horrified. I would say, this is great, because then I asked people, okay, organize them, and they did. And then they started volunteering to work on a task force to address that problem. And so the staff loved it. But we had to create an environment where it was okay to say, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, or this isn't going to fly. And then they got engaged, and they started to make the strategic plan their own. So my role is not to bring expertise to the organization. My role is to help them harvest the wisdom that's already there. Now, I know a lot about a lot of topics, so I sort of know where the holes are. I know what topics haven't been discussed, so I'll ask about them. So I do try to, if I have any expertise at all, it's simply having a richer map of the terrain. So I can tell when the conversation has been adequate or not, or whether we've been avoiding this particular topic. But again, it's that notion that the conflict is going to be resolved when the relevant parties have a safe place to participate and engage. And there's a referee, facilitator, moderator, consultant who keeps them within bounds. So my role is not to be an expert. The fact is, I've almost never had a job. I worked at Stanford as a professor, but I never got evaluated. I never got told what to do. I only got asked what quarter I was going to teach what course. As long as it was work, love, or sex, they were happy.
Yeah.
So I know nothing about what it's like to have a job in an organization, but I know a fair amount about the structure of the pieces and the parts of an organization, and I know a fair amount about human dynamics. That turns out to be useful for organizations in distress.
And so I love the juxtaposition of your humility, accepting that the people who are in the organization, they know what they know and and they have some expertise, as well as the recognition and appreciation of what you bring to the table. So
Yeah.
it's a unique mix because I imagine keeping that in balance is being able to draw on or hold the client in positive regard, saying, your people got this, and also knowing what you bring to the table so that you can also so that you can actually do that, so that you can actually serve your people.
Mhm.
So I love that. And so how then, because you were a lecturer for a number of years and being around academics, I know that some academics have an ego because it goes with the territory, right? Because you're telling us what you've learned and you studied. How did you suppress that part of yourself to be able to be in service of a group?
If you're a professor teaching 120 18 and 19-year-olds who are hormonally flooded, and you're trying to get them to think about social structure, it's a very humbling experience. Uh, and you sort of have to step out of any ego you have and realize I have to work very hard just to get their attention. Then maybe I can get them to hear something. But I always found teaching to be, um, if you have any foibles in your personality, trying to teach undergraduates will bring them to the fore.
Mhm.
Um, and they taught me a lot. I think I learned more in the first 2 or 3 years of trying to teach than I ever did about human dynamics. Um, so I always felt pretty grateful for the experiences I had as a instructor at Stanford. They were some of the happiest years of my life. Uh,
Mhm.
it's a very exciting group to work with, but the price of admission is that you meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And I get a sense that that ability to meet people where they're at, it sounds like a success factor for you when you enter into an organization.
I think it's one of the things that our clients are actually hungry for,
Mhm.
is somebody who will take us as we are, without a filter, without a prejudgment, without an overlay that says this is how you ought to be. You're not DEIB enough. You're not innovative enough. I think clients want somebody who will be respectful and compassionate. And at the same time, listen to the gaps they would like to fill, the transitions they'd like to make. But to come in with an open heart, willing to see them as they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and not be upset about it.
Yeah. And I think that's a consultant's challenge, whether you're a beauty consultant or you're a facilitator, sort
Yeah.
of working that balance between, oh my God, the client doesn't have X, Y, and Z, and the client has enough. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of consultants have because people are paying us to come in and say all that's wrong with them. And at the same time, the client doesn't want to hear all that's wrong with them.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you like, do you have a way that you prepare yourself to enter into a client space? Or how do you get yourself ready for that? Or it's just this is just Jerry and you show up?
I think we set ourselves up for that when we emphasize our services. So
Hmm.
if my whole message to the business world is that I do team building, I do strategic planning, I do DEIB, I am setting myself up as an expert that they should attend to and listen to. And it also conveys the notion that I know more about teamwork than you do. If you'll just take notes and be quiet, you'll learn a lot. I like to emphasize the symptoms I can speak to. My clients don't care what skill sets I have. What they care about is, can I add some value to this conversation about low morale? Can I add some value to this discussion we have about our, skyrocketing turnover? Can I help them deal with strategic planning that is pallid and fades out? So I focus on the client's symptoms. At some point, we're going to talk about what to do, but I don't lead with solutions. I lead with an awareness of the pain they feel around keeping employees engaged, around building a succession plan for leadership. That's their distress. So I'll ask questions about that. I don't come in and say, look, I've got a strategic planning session that'll knock your socks off. If you buy today, I'll give you a 20% discount. It's, I don't come in with a prescribed set of solutions. I come in with an intelligent approach to unraveling their distress.
That is such beautiful language. And it really debunks a few things that we've been told, right? Because we all go off and specialize. So you specialize in team building and strategic planning. And this is therefore what we come in the market to offer. And what you're saying is that, and it's true, nobody is interested in team building. What they're interested in is developing trust or removing the fear that people have of speaking up.
Yeah. Or it might be that this company runs on project teams. We're a project-oriented company, and our performance is slipping.
Yeah.
More and more of our projects are over budget and over schedule, and it's becoming really problematic. And that's my distress. And maybe the problem is team building. Maybe the problem is structure. Maybe it's a poor strategic plan. I don't know yet. So I don't want to offer team building, even if they ask for it. I want to offer a curious mind and an informed mind to help unravel their situation. We'll discover along the way whether what we need is better interpersonal skills, what we need is a redesigned work process, what we need is greater clarity and priorities, what we need is a new leader to replace the client that brought me in. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, and so in this, I'm getting a sense of space, slowing down, and time. Because very often a client comes to me and says, I want a team retreat. And then after I do, an assessment, it's like, you don't need a team retreat. You need something completely different. So how do you, and I get the sense from what you're saying is that the client may or may not know what the solution is. And the consultant does not know what the solution is. And that's why a conversation, some questions, an assessment, whatever it is you choose, but there's something that needs to open up that initial statement to see actually what is going on inside. So how do you deal with a client who comes to you and says, on the 20th of October, we're going to have a 2-day team retreat and we want you because we have XYZ problems in our team. How do you get that client to slow down and open up a little bit more?
First thing I'd say is I'd love to do that. Thank you very much for considering me. I have a million questions.
Okay,
You've
so
lived
don't
this
say no.
problem. Yeah.
So step one, don't say no to work. All right, good. Let's go.
No, it's not that I'm hungry for the work. I don't want to fight with my client.
Right.
If they think they need a team building, there's a chance they're right. But at the very least, that's where the energy is. So I'm going to go with that. Glad to do that. As we come up to that day, I think it would be really useful if we could fine tune the content. So I would like to send out a brief survey to a few people, not just the attendees, 400 or 500 people who rely on the attendees to provide that kind of direction in the company. So I have a few questions I'd like to ask of a lot of people. That'll allow us to really hone down the content. Now, I'm going to add a couple of interesting questions to that little survey. And I may come back and say, gee, I heard a lot of comments about structures and policies getting in the way of good teamwork. Maybe we can make that one of the discussion topics on the retreat. So maybe what the client is calling a team building retreat, I'm thinking of as a focus group to define the problem. So the outcome of this retreat is not going to be that everything is done. The outcome of this retreat is going to be a clear understanding of what things are interpersonal skill and what things are structure and policy, and what things are related to leadership style. I've taught courses on project management, and the students have said, this is wonderful stuff. I'm so glad I came to this class. I'll love to use this at my next job. I can't use it here, of course, because the senior leadership would never tolerate it. Oh, okay. So the course in project management simply shone a light in a dark corner.
Yeah.
And the dark corner was repressive, restrictive management practices. So teaching them all about critical path and work breakdown structure and Gantt charts and PERT charts isn't going to make any difference. But that's a good outcome from a course.
Yes, it is. And while you were describing your approach to this team retreat question, what really struck me is the systems level at which you decided to ask the questions, because you didn't just stick with that in one system, you expanded it to the systems that are interconnected with it. So from that one team retreat, there's a possibility to learn about the entire system. So what you're doing with the team is basically more holistic, or more grounded in what the organization may need,
Yeah.
or what may be missing in the wider system.
So
That
I'll spend
I learned something
two-thirds,
today. Yeah.
I'll spend the first two-thirds of the day providing them with essential skills and training. I'll spend the last third saying, what could possibly interfere with implementing these skills in this organization? Why isn't everybody just going to sit up and take notice and vote yes? And then they start telling me all the things that will get in the way. People here don't think like this. That's countercultural for us. People don't talk in meetings. They only talk in the hallway after the meeting. You haven't met our CFO yet, have you? Yeah, well, when you do, you'll understand. And then, so now they're telling me about all the other obstacles. So now I'm going to do a postmortem with my client. Boy, we learned a lot. That was really a successful retreat. Kudos to you for setting that up. Here's the things that we learned. And then we talk about another contract.
And Jerry, at the top of this, when I was introducing you, I spoke about your generosity. And I'm just thinking how generous of you. I really want to stop and just appreciate how generous it is for you to actually share that as a method. Because a lot of consultants are saying, I got this client, it's a one-off. How do I make it into something more? And there it is, that your generosity in terms of, one, expanding the conversation beyond just your client, two, using that information to get more information, then three, presenting it back to your client and saying, these are some of the bigger things that are happening in your system and maybe how it manifested in this particular team. So guys, you just got like step 1, 2, 3, how to turn a one-day consultancy into something a little bit longer, and also to serve the client in a different way. So I want to thank you for that, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, if we think of ourselves as experts, we can get seduced into wanting to protect our property.
Yeah.
So we have proprietary, stuff, and I don't want to show it to you until you signed a contract. If we think about ourselves as consultants in the way that I suggested, it's your ability to ask questions and open up the discussion that really is the value you bring, not the solution that you have in the back of your mind. Generosity isn't just an occasional personality flaw that I'm working on. I think that's our strategy.
Yeah.
We want to be the node in the network that invites people out, that encourages contribution, that energizes people to participate. And you do that by putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
I very often will take advantage of the fact that I'm an old sociologist, so I don't know anything at all about business. Tell me again more about why that doesn't work. Gee, I'm I'm not an IT person. I still have trouble keyboarding. Tell me again about this architecture you're trying to promote. But I think that approach and being willing to, to share whatever insight or suggestions I have, I think that's the way we do our work. We think of ourselves as providing services to clients. I think we're actually the outsourced R&D department in organizational effectiveness. We're supposed to think about these things and worry about them and bring them back to the client. If you've got some insights, share them. that's why they're going to come back to you and hire you for a gig. I think the best marketing is to give stuff away. I've almost always had it come back, multiple times over.
Yeah, this is really beautiful. I mean that because there's so many things that you said that we use, as catch-all phrases. Like you were explaining what curiosity really is.
Mhm.
Everybody says remain curious, but you just gave like a TED talk on curiosity. And then we speak about generosity, and you are making the business case for
Yeah.
generosity. And
And
also, like I get a sense that it is who you are, and you've been able to use it in your work.
it, uh, it, I think you have to understand the mindset of the academic. If you're an academic, you're tickled to death that somebody actually listens. Um, so I'm always feel warmed when somebody is curious and asks questions and wants to keep the conversation going. By the way, this all applies to the concern for leadership. Leaders too often think that they're the expert. They're the ones with the authority. They're the ones with the power. They're the ones who ought to be pulling the levers left or right, saying yes or no, up or down. And so they mistake that for their um, for their role as a leader. And that's not why they're there. And that's not what the company needs, which I
Absolutely.
can say more about if you.
Absolutely. You go
Yeah.
right ahead.
I think that we kind of got off on the wrong foot in our approach to leadership. We found successful companies and we thought, let's figure out what the traits were of the man or woman behind that company. Let's figure out the traits of great leaders, and then we'll hire for that. And then we'll get one of those great leaders, and then we'll be a great company. Um, so we found out that leaders needed to be charismatic, and they need to be humble, and they need to exude integrity, and they need to be this, and they need to be that. So we ended up coaching leaders on filling all the gaps in their personal style and attitude and personality makeup or whatever. I think we need to be asking, what are the traits of a well-led company? Because the most interesting trait of a well-led company is that if the leader leaves for a few weeks, nobody notices. Things keep going because the company has been built and structured in a way that it's self-sustaining and self-supporting. So the role of the leader is not to call the shots. It's not to be the one waving the flag at the front of the charge. The role of the leader is to make sure that the company has the critical traits of a well-led organization. It has a clearly defined goal and mission and purpose. We know why we're here. And we've even decomposed that a little bit into objectives. And then equally important, we constructed the means to achieve those objectives. A strategic plan is a fantasy until you build the works processes and the structures to enable its achievement. So the ends are clear, the means are clear, and third, there's a community that people can connect to and belong to. There's a container for all that directed effort. So there's a community that says you are valued and acknowledged, independent of your productivity. Okay? You're a person of worth. There's a place where you can feel like you belong. And there's a culture that ties us all together. We're a community in the sense that we have a shared narrative, who we are, why it's important, what we do, and how we treat each other. Those three things are critical for a well-led company. Clear statement of ends, well-developed means, and a container, community, and a culture that brings people together and allows them to exercise those means to achieve those ends. That's a well-led company. And the person in the biggest box on the org chart can't do it alone. It turns out that leadership is not a personality trait. It's not one of the 3 or 4 of the Myers-Briggs type indicators. It's not even a role. It's not the responsibility of the people with big boxes on the org chart. It's a function. And everybody has to contribute to fulfilling that function. So the supervisor who stands over the frontline worker on the manufacturing floor has to ensure that leadership is provided to this company. We know what we're doing, we know what our objectives are, we attend to building the right means to achieve them, and we contribute to that community and that culture that binds us together. Everybody has to do that to deliver that function to the organization. The role of the person we call the leader is to make sure that everyone understands that you're contributing to satisfying a function this company needs. You don't do it through power and authority. It's a little more complicated than saying yay or nay. But too often, people that are in positions of authority think their job is to do exactly that. Approve, disapprove, say yes, go left, go right. That's not satisfying the function of leadership in the organization. So I would encourage people that do coaching to sort of explore with your client what tells you this company is well led and what's missing in terms of its capability to operate as an effective company. Your job is to somehow make sure that gap gets filled. And the less you do it from your own personal effort, the better. Leadership is not a call to be more active. Leadership is a call to make sure everybody else in the organization is playing their role to satisfy that function. If I have to be out there yelling at people and cracking the whip and pushing them forward, then I'm failing as a leader. If I'm a really good leader, in this sense of the word, I can leave for 3 weeks and nobody will notice. Because we've built an organization that's self-sustaining and self-supportive.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing that between the three buckets, which is the container for the people, the objectives and the goals and the way that the functions run and that productivity,
Right.
that the leader is sort of the people at different levels of the system who are actually sort of stretching across and keeping it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also building the mechanism for people to keep it together themselves. I mean, if I'm leading a project team, at some point, the team should be doing the work, not the team leader. The team leader is the one who kind of points to the task. How are we going to work together? That last meeting we had was pretty contentious. What should we do differently this time around? I want to be clear. Let's kind of go over our priorities and see if we all have the same list. So they're making sure that the function's been fulfilled, so that they have to step out of the meeting early. Somebody else steps up and says, okay, let's keep going because we all know what we're doing. When Frank gets back, we'll update him. So again, leadership is a function to be satisfied, not the role of a person.
Absolutely. And Jerry, on that note, I just wanted to just invite any member of our audience, if you have any thoughts based on what all that Jerry has shared before. It's been a lot, right? So you could share if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions or any comments. This is the time when you can come on and share those. So I'm going to leave some space for you to do that.
That would be great. I'd love to hear if any of this landed well, if it fits with what you do, or if it suggests something new.
So while they get their stuff together, I'll just read what's in the chat. Jerry has such a big heart and so much wisdom. I agree. And that's from Allison. Dave is saying, hi, Maxine, thank you for hosting. Is this being recorded? Absolutely, it is. Dave, see people as they are and not be upset about who they are. Wow. Great questions, Maxine. Loving the insightful answers, Jerry. Thank you. You're most welcome, Dave. Hope I find the discussion very affirming. Robin, Jerry's generosity is beyond amazing. Absolutely. Dave, best marketing is to give stuff away, serving ahead. Generosity is the strategy. I love that. How insightful. A question from Dave. Why
So
is
let's pick up Dave's question.
a
Why is the
fantasy?
strategic plan a fantasy?
Yes.
It's a fantasy because it's all intention and desire. We want to be fifth in the marketplace. We want to be the preeminent provider of this particular technology. We want to sell the best chainsaws on the planet. Gee, that's great. That's nice. How are you going to make it happen? Tell me the work process that's going to create that kind of quality product. Show me the structure that's going to bring the right people together in the right place and time to contribute to that kind of organization. Until you articulate the work processes behind the strategy, it's just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to have a strategic plan which is aggressive, optimistic, forward-reaching, but we got to put wheels on the bus. We got to say, and here's the work process that we think will give us that capability. And what's more, we're going to put the budget and staff into that work process so that it can actually work.
Yeah. And
Too many organizations have a work process that's essential, but we can't fill all the positions because so-and-so is on maternity leave and these two people are taking a sabbatical and we have an open position we can't afford to fill. So now the strategic plan is a lie. It's a statement of intent, but then I hold back. I don't put the resources in place to actually make it happen. And I think the biggest dishonesty in organizations is that gap between intention and adequately resourced work processes. You either are going to go back and revise your plan. We want to be 15th, not 5th in the marketplace. We want to have a really good chainsaw, not an excellent chainsaw, because that's all we can deliver. Okay, let's be honest about that. So that's why I think there's that strategic plan, unless there's a set of work processes to match, it's a fantasy. Let's make it a reality by putting the wheels on the bus so that we can actually deliver.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jerry, because very often companies change their strategic plans, but they don't change their business processes. So, and then they wonder why their projects fail or they can't operationalize their plans. Absolutely. There's another question as well there, Jerry, which is
Allison,
yeah.
What techniques do you use to reframe the community container when it tends to be restrictive and punitive? You know, sometimes the role that we play is more like a mirror than anything else. Someone needs to stand up at the front of the room and say, you know, I hear that you want to be risk-taking and you want to be innovative and you want to be at the forefront. But I've also picked up from people that if you make a mistake around here, you get your butt kicked. And if you don't say what people are wanting to hear, you get kind of shunned. So I'm hearing a gap between the way you would like to operate and the way you typically do. Does anyone else see that? Is that as frustrating as I imagine it is? Can anybody give me an example of a case where you really behaved the way you wished you would? Can anyone give me an example of a case or a meeting or project where we nailed it? We really behaved the way we wished we could be. And then I'll ask, can someone give me an example of a project where we did the reverse, where we shot ourselves in the foot, or we were not at our best? You walked out of the project or the meeting and thinking, that's not the company I want to work for. So I'll just make it explicit and put it on the table. Then I'll ask, when is it going to be hard for you, hardest, to be the kind of culture you want to be? When is it going to be difficult? Well, it's going to be when I think my coworker's got a dumb idea. Okay, great, that sounds tough. What else? When I want to tell the boss he needs to back off. Okay, that sounds like it's tricky. What else? When else is it going to be hard for us to be the way we want to be? Well, we've hired a bunch of millennials and God damn it, I'm so sick and tired of their attitude. I said, okay, that sounds like a toughie. Let's talk about those. How do you want to respond in those situations that's consonant with the way you want to treat each other? And we'll start redesigning the culture. But I think the critical step is naming it, giving words to it, making it a legitimate topic of discussion, and inviting people to work through it. When were we at our best? When were we at worst? When is it going to be a real challenge to be the way you want to be? How would you like to handle that situation? How do you want to be told that I think your idea is dumb? Okay, well, there's a more tactful way to say it than that. What would it sound like? Right.
And so from what you're saying there, Jerry, in terms of sharing and naming, it sounds as a real role for the consultant or the consultant, whatever you call yourself, for that external party to really have some language skills.
I think it's one of the benefits that I took from my training as a therapist is learning how to frame things in a way that was, opened up a new perspective. I had a father once who brought in his 16-year-old son because he was obnoxious and stubborn and opinionated and mouthy, and he wanted me to somehow check him and rein him in. Uh, and I said, I think your kid's going to do fine. No one's going to take advantage of him. He'll lose a couple of jobs before he polishes some rough edges, but he's not going to get taken advantage of. He's going to do just fine. I'm actually worried about your 12-year-old daughter. She's been quiet as a mouse. Apparently, she hasn't learned from you all the things that your son learned from you. He's a chip off the old block. Why don't we talk about her for a while? He had never thought about his son's rebelliousness as a sign of strength. He just saw it as a challenge to his authority. This kid's taking on his dad. I'm not worried about him. He'll do fine. Let's see if you can convey the same edginess to your 12-year-old daughter. She's just at a time in her life when she needs to stand up and speak up. So reframing the situation in a way that opens up some new opportunities. When people tell me about all the flaws in the organization, when they tell me about the way our culture is sour and counterproductive, when they tell me about, all these problems, the first thing I say is, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to say it out loud. That's a real contribution. I appreciate your candor and your directness. Let's see if we can build on it. So they were afraid to say something negative, and the first thing I do is applaud them for making a positive contribution. Reframes the conversation. Hope you noted that sometimes if we facilitate effectively, the group opens up and they start to appreciate each other. Even to the point, I think you're suggesting that they may not appreciate the value of your work as a facilitator. They may or may not appreciate me as a facilitator. The important thing is they ended up talking to each other much more. And at the end of the day, I can say thank you all for participating at the level that you did. It was my pleasure to help in any way that I did.
Yeah, so one of the things that struck me, Jerry, when you were speaking about that example was the contradictions. So there was a contradiction that you presented in terms of when you articulated what was going on, but you presented a contradiction. And I'm thinking that is one way to reframe. What are other ways in which you can reframe what's happening in a room?
Boy, this goes to all of the tips and tricks and nuances and subtleties and wrinkles of facilitation. I know that some reframing actually happens subliminally. It's the fact that I don't react, that I treat something as matter of fact. So you think your boss is a real asshole. Okay, that sounds like it's worth exploring a bit. Thanks for bringing that up. But I didn't, go, I didn't roll my eyes. I treated things as simply the facts of the case, events that happened. So some of it is through sort of nonverbal cues. I know I do a lot as a facilitator to provide focus. I never facilitate without having a whiteboard or a mural or something that I can put the problem on the wall. So rather than us pointing fingers at each other and making accusations, we are now going to stand shoulder to shoulder to work on it. And the it is characterized on the board, graphically, verbally, however. So there's a thing that we're working on which is separate from us. We together as a group, shoulder to shoulder, will focus on it. So I have to provide the group that focus. I never want to say, okay, how many of you think David Parsons has the right idea, in contrast to Allison Keeley? Then I just get them fighting with each other. I want to get, okay, we've had a couple of contributions around this issue, other thoughts about this issue. It's a thing. And we can be together in our friction around that thing. We can be collaborative around our different perspectives about that thing because it's externalized a little bit. I know that I have to exemplify and enforce fair rules of interaction. So if Stephanie is soaking up too much time with her comments, Stephanie, thank you for your contributions. I want to hear from the other folks to see how they react to these issues. So let me ask you to hold off for a second. I haven't heard anything from Allison or Robin or Jake yet. And so I create a fair space where people know that they won't get trampled. They'll be respected. So I'm structuring the conversation by providing focus. I'm non-verbally conveying an acceptance of the things that have happened, okay? And I'm making it clear that everybody gets a time with the mic. Everyone gets a chance to participate. Nobody gets to dominate. I've occasionally had to coach executives in meetings. I will just tell them, you don't get to say anything. Well, that's not true. You can say thank you, and you can say, tell me more. That's it. If people ask you for your opinion, you say, thanks for asking, but I'm actually here to learn more about yours. You don't get to participate. So sometimes I'll have to coach people that are tend to dominate and just, cut them off at the knees, gracefully and tactfully.
Thank you. There's some more questions in the chat, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so can you articulate the difference between facilitation and consulting? And that's from Vin.
The distinction I'd make is in facilitation, we're oftentimes quite neutral. That is, we are literally there to enable them to have a conversation that they might stumble through without sort of a referee, moderator, guide, etc. I think in consulting work, we're actually bringing some real value to the table, not in terms of a solution, but in terms of a broader, deeper understanding of the mess they're in. If you want to talk about teamwork, I've got a model of teams in the back of my head. If you want to talk about strategic planning, I have a very elaborate model of what all the pieces and parts are of strategic planning. If you want to talk about leadership, I can articulate the 4 or 5 key things required of someone who has a big box on the org chart. So I know what's been avoided. I know questions to ask that no one has raised. So as a consultant in front of a group, I might say, boy, nobody has said anything about the policies in this organization. Are they that neutral? I mean, does anyone ever bump up against a policy that gets in the way? Or no one said anything about what happens when you screw up. I mean, is everyone perfect and never makes a mistake? What happens when somebody, makes a $10,000 mistake in this organization? So I know, because I have a broader map in my head, what are some topics that need to be addressed? I mean, you've all been really appreciative of Bob's leadership. Does Bob know when to sit down, shut up, and step back? Because I know that's an important thing for a leader to know, is when to get out of the way. Well, maybe Bob just loves being the center of attention, and so he never sits down.
Yes, I think that takes care of the questions. Hope had a question, but I think you answered it when you were talking previously. And so, Jerry, we have maybe about 10 more minutes left in our conversation. And I really wanted to ask you about if you were to create from nothing an organization that works. Or let me change that question. If you were to create a community of consultants, what would that look like? Or a community for consultants, what would that look like?
Wow. It's ironic to me that we celebrate the virtues of collaboration and community and cooperation and working together, and then we establish solo practice. We need to eat our own dog food. As consultants, we need to find our community. Most of us have informal connections to colleagues that we rely on. I think we need to make those even more visible, make it clear that we are members of a network, that my clients can approach me knowing that if I'm not the right person for the concerns they have, I will help them find the right person. Because I know a bunch of other consultants. I know 10 that I collaborate with frequently, and they know 100 more. And if you need someone that has a skill set I don't have, I'll help you find it. So let's act like we're a community. Let's demonstrate that we can collaborate, coordinate with others, be part of a team. And then the other thing I think we need to do is start sharing our models. That's the real value, I think, that we bring to the table. We have thought about and worried about and lost sleep over topics that our clients haven't got time to think about. If I'm making lawn furniture, I'm worried about supply chains and the hiring problem we have and the cash flow crunch. I haven't got time to think about the challenges of team dynamics. I need somebody else who's spent that time. We need to start sharing that with each other and eventually with our clients. It's what structures our facilitation and our consulting work with them. So one is that we form a community of consultants, not just a professional association, a community, people that know each other, trust each other, relate with each other frequently. And what the currency in that relation, in that community, is the ways we understand organizational life. This is what we think strategic planning needs to contain. This is what we think good teams look like. So I think those are the two things I would look for the most in terms of a community of consultants. That we create communities, we create visible collections of people, whether it's a informal association that shows up as a joint website, that'd be one possibility. And that we are open about the models we're building. This is what I've learned from the last 10 years of practice about how leaders need to operate. What do you got? This is my model of organizational change. Show me yours. So that's what I would hope for. That's actually what I'm going to try to do in the OD network this coming year, is create that community of practice for people that are seasoned in our field.
And I have so many thoughts about it, all positive. First one is that it's kind of like where we started. I started speaking about your generosity. You shared with us about your generosity in terms of how you work and how you enter into a client system. And now you're also looking forward to being generous and inviting other consultants into this real community of generosity, right? I have something you
Yeah.
share. And it sort of debunks a lot of models that we learn because we learn to be a consultant. You know, you create a model, you probably publish a book on your model, then you go around, solo practitioner, you know, probably build a business around your practice. And we've
Yeah.
seen that model be successful for so many people.
Yeah.
And what you're offering today, it feels a lot easier.
I'm actually a little embarrassed. I've been in practice 45 years. There's a whole bunch of things that became real clear to me in the last 10. So I missed a bunch of things in the first 35 years of my practice. I'm a little embarrassed about that, and I'm really eager to talk to other people that have 45 years experience to see, what did you learn in the last 5? What did you miss in the first 30 years of your practice? Gee, maybe we could share that with the people that have 5 years of practice, save them 30 years of wandering in the desert. I find that just very appealing. I can't wait to get this community off the ground so we can share models with each other and think about how we can pass them on to the people coming up behind us.
Yeah.
I think that's what a field like this is supposed to do.
Yeah. You know,
Grow itself up.
yeah, but it's what a lot of fields did before, right? Before there were associations and exams, it was all apprenticeships, right? So we apprentice ourselves with a senior practitioner, and we learn from that person, and we were in community with the senior practitioner and his or her other practitioners. And we sort of lost that when we became streamlined, and then there were exams, and so it became an individual journey. So I love the idea of going back to mentorship, you know, whether or not you pass an exam, for us to be in community, sharing what we've learned. And again, coming from that more humanistic perspective of this is what I have learned, this is what I've experienced, this is what my failures are, and really sharing and learning and growing together. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I'll leave the floor open before we close. So if anybody wants to say anything, you could put your camera on and you could share your thoughts. So just go for it. Anybody who wants to come on camera and just speak, I'll leave this space for you. We're getting a lot of messages coming through, but nobody's coming on. So that's fine. Okay, there you go. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, Jerry. Hi, I'm so glad I was able to make this. And I just always enjoy the wisdom that you share. And I wish I had met you 20, 30 years ago to learn from you in French's style. It would have been amazing.
Well, 20 years ago, I wasn't quite as smart as I am now, but I
Um,
still would have been
Pretty
nice.
sure you were pretty smart even then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Allison, for sharing that with us. And for
By the way, I'll follow up with Dave's comment.
Let's Dave's comment.
I know that my clients appreciate my contribution when they say something like, "Well, I never thought about this way before." That's when I know that I've brought some real value to the table, and I know that they know that.
Yeah. 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 I'm really grateful. I don't have any words. And I think that's really like a good sign for me when I can't think of a question or comment. It means that I'm full. It means
We,
that
we,
I've,
we covered it all.
yeah, I think I'm good. And there's Maheen. Hi, Maheen.
I want to extend my deep gratitude to you both for having the conversation. While I've had many with Jerry over the years, I'm constantly encouraged to keep leaning into what fits best for who I am and how I can show up for the people I can support. And specifically from today, um, I'm even more encouraged about my idea around working in community and building that out in a way that fits for me. I've started those conversations to sort of put it out loud in the world rather than keep it internal or in quiet with just my community. So I'm excited for that. Again, thanks for having that conversation and looking forward to connecting with more folks on that topic.
Thank you, Maheen. Hi, Dave. Oh, you're muted, Dave.
Hey Maxine, hey Jerry. Thanks again. And I hope people don't get sick of me, but this has been inspiring so much. So it's my question. Jerry and Maxine, what will this community look like that you're looking to create? Will there be a Facebook page? Will there be a blog that we can go to and
Dave, I'm going to announce it in January as a group within the OD network. It'll be a community of practice for mentors. I hope we
how
have
do
our
you
people.
join the OD network so we don't miss it?
That would be one opportunity, or you could also just send me a note and I'll make sure you hear about it. That's why I have my email there in my label. I'm hoping that the group will have a foundational meeting in early February. And I don't know quite how they're going to work yet, but they provide you had your first client in law enforcement and you need someone who's been there before, that this is a group you could write to and say, hey, I really need someone to look over my shoulder and help me through this forest. Rather than waiting for a program to launch, you could reach out when you need it. So that's my hope.
Okay, so keep our eyes open in February for an announcement.
Yep.
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah, and Dave, if you or anybody else on the chat wants to drop your email into the chat, what I'll do is I'll just if when I hear the announcement, I'll probably hear it. I'll just send it out to everybody as well. And of course, feel free to join both of us on LinkedIn. Jerry's on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. follow us I'm on Instagram, on TikTok as well. So you keep in touch with us. Let's have our community. And that's what we do, right? We stay in community fearlessly and just invite each other in. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Okay.
you're most welcome. So that brings us to the top of the hour. And Jerry, I mean, I can't thank you enough for just being here with us, really in the Talley style and just making something that's very complex, awesomely simple. And of course, for your generosity, not holding back and just sharing from your experience, your knowledge, your thoughts, really provoking us to unlearn what we've learned before and to absolutely, we're all leaving here richer for this conversation. Thank you so much.